You're in charge of all the
Yeah,
housekeeping.
that's right. The house is a mess.
I'm just the good looks on this.
You're the eye candy, and I sweep the road.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back into Bufnagle, the podcast. I'm Zach, and as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are we doing today?
Zach, as you could probably guess, I am fantastic. It is a kind of cold and gray day here in warm and cheerful Speedway, Indiana. I'm visiting your sister again, just for fun. But anyway, it's going great. I'm having a good week so far. December's rolling, and I am rolling right along with it. So just a couple little announcements, as we typically do here at the beginning. First of all, thank you all to all the listeners who have taken time out of their day to listen to us ramble a little bit. We appreciate your patronage, and we appreciate you listening. Remember, you can contact us anytime, day or night, Spotify, because that way you will get alerted when our new episodes drop. So please feel free to use Spotify.
That sounds like a great idea, Rafe. Rafe, do you have any sponsors today, or are we just, making this up as we go along like we usually do?
Well, our sponsors, we're in negotiations with a couple very interesting sponsors, and I have to say I would love to do some reveals yet, but you know how those business interactions work. Sometimes you have to be a little cautious until things are laid out and they're correct. So you are listening to us today through the patronage of me and Zach. So it's all good, and we'll have somebody talking with us next week.
Sounds like a great plan there, Rafe. So speaking on things, last couple weeks ago, we had our good friend Bob, America's favorite rocket scientist, on, and he told a great story about kind of leadership and stepping up and kindness in work and professional life. And that got me thinking on some ideas I have developed myself about lessons in leadership and things we can take away from leadership, professionalism, athletics as a whole.
So you've been doing this for a while now. You've been working on developing, I guess you could say, principles or mantras, or for lack of a better term, even cliches that you can apply in a variety of situations that no matter what you're doing, whether it's sports or politics or business or school or whatever you're working on, right?
Yeah, I would call them Zach-isms, but that's not very professional. So I think mantras or guides or philosophy is kind of a better terminology for them. And I have I want to say it's 7 of them. Yeah, there's 7, and then they all tie together into an 8th ideology end goal.
All right, so we were talking earlier this week about that, and you kind of laid out some of these general principles to me. And my first thought was, oh well, here we go. Zach's got some principles he's going to share. But this is some pretty good stuff. It's like a lot of these things by themselves, they might not be anything, but in the framework of we all do this, right? Of a life philosophy. Where do you stand? What do you do? How do you make decisions when it's not obvious what to do? And these are some great things. So Zach, what's Zach-ism number 1?
Yeah. So just a little background. I've been working on these kind of my whole life as, like you said, guiding principles. And in March, when quarantine happened, I was texting with a friend and these kind of came up. And then I began slowly. At the time, I had a whiteboard in my apartment and I would write them on the whiteboard, actually. And I would look at them every day. And then over quarantine and everything else that has happened over the past, 7 years that we've been in quarantine, I have expanded on these and broadened them in their depth and what they mean and their meaning behind them. And the first one is failure leads to growth. Resiliency matters. So it's a very simple concept. It's failure leads to growth. You have to kind of try something, figure it out, and if you fail, then you take whatever the good was in that you hold on to it, you figure out why you stumbled, and you move on to the next thing. You're resilient in the way that you move forward, and then that creates progress. You can go back. Any famous quote you want is somehow related to why do we fall and we get back up. So it's the same concept with that, and you kind of apply it to life.
So that's a Batman quote, right, from one of the recent Batman movies, right? And that's what Bruce Wayne's father told him.
Yeah. So the Batman Begins movie, I believe it came out in 2005, directed by Christopher Nolan. There's an early flashback scene where Bruce falls down a well, and his dad, goes and rescues him, and Bruce is scared, and he doesn't want to go back to the well because, he fell and he felt isolated and alone. And his dad kind of reiterates these ideas of, Bruce, we fall, we stumble, so we can get back up and we can be better.
That's not certainly not a new thing that you thought of. I mean, that's very common, but it's so vitally important. So we used to tell that to you guys when we were coaching basketball and all those other things, is that, it doesn't matter. We used to phrase it doesn't matter how many times you fall. What matters is how many times you get back up. And the problem comes in is if you fall and you don't bother getting back up. And so that, when you were a little kid, one time we went on this bike ride, you and me and Harry, and you were little. You were what, 8, maybe 10, some kind of.
Yeah, I think it was before like 6th grade. So whatever age that is, I don't know. I don't know how old I am at the moment. So who knows how old I was back then. So
I get you. I also have to do this. I have to figure out what year it is, and then do the subtraction. And then there's the whole leap year.
I have the benefit of my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law are the same age as me. So I just ask them how old they are and I'm done.
I got you. So we went on this bike ride, and it was one of these rail trails where they used to have a railroad there, and the rails have been removed and they've been paved with like crushed limestone. And I dropped you and Harry off on one end of the trail, and then I drove to the other end of the trail, parked the truck, and then I started riding toward you guys. And it took me a while. It was a long trail, several, multiple miles, 25 miles or something like that. And I started biking down, and you guys were biking up. And I met you guys partway through. And I remember you guys came around a corner, and Harry came first because he was, he's older brother, and you were zooming along behind him. And there you were covered in dirt and in mud and in like scratches and leaves. And you're like, animals hanging off of you and blood and stuff, snakes in your bike spokes. And I was like, what the heck happened to you guys? And you were like, well, I ran off the road.
Yeah. And that's a good description of it.
Well, and you had told the story that you were behind Harry. You had reached down for your water bottle, taken a drink, put the water bottle back in, and lost control and ran off the road, off the path, into the brambles. And you were just lying there and picking yourself back up when some lady comes by and says, are you all right? And you were like, yeah, I think so. And getting
I got to keep going.
At that point, and that's one of those things, right? You have to keep going, because the only other choice is to concede to darkness, right? And that's a lesson. And we tried to push that on you guys a lot, is got to keep going. Get back up. It's okay to fall. Got to keep moving forward. It doesn't do any good to look back. So failure leads to growth, and resiliency matters. All right. That's
and just another point on that is there's a big difference between quitting and failure. And I think a lot that we see in media and culture today is people look at failure as, oh, you didn't do it. You're not good enough. Just move on to the next thing. And it's just like, you don't get any benefit if you're just like, oh, I tried it. Okay, done. Like, okay, if the point is just to try a million different things and say you did it, you don't grow or gain anything from that. You're doing something just to quit and say, okay, like you're giving up, you're conceding to that darkness, like you mentioned, and you're not taking, okay, what worked, what did I do well, what can I improve on, and how do I go forward with this?
Yeah, we talked to our, America's favorite rocket scientist a couple of weeks ago, and if you study the history of rocketry over the last 100 years or 120 years, whatever it's been, incremental improvements come from failure. If the rocket goes up and works, you don't really learn anything. All right. So every now and then they will run the rocket, and it will break.
It won't work.
It will break catastrophically often. And that's where the real growth comes from, is from the failure. So don't actively seek out failure, but recognize that it will be there. And those who are successful are the ones who have overcome the failure. So that's your adage number one. Do you have a number two?
I do have another two. So number two is a segment from a quote from a speech by Teddy Roosevelt. So the segment is "It's not the critic who counts" is the segment, and then the bigger quote I can read if you'd like me to do that.
Yeah, I would love to hear that, because I think it's worthwhile that people hear this in its context. So Teddy Roosevelt was giving a speech in Paris in 1910. It was called "Citizenship in a Republic," and it was about being how are you a citizen in a republic? And it was this 35-page speech that he read in 1910. And Zach, you just have a little single paragraph, couple sentences here.
Yeah. And so this comes from the middle of the speech, but here we go. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that this place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Yeah, and that is, if I understand correctly, you have that on a placard in your office. Is that right?
That is correct. I just read it from said placard in my office. That has been with me.
But it was also on a placard when you were in high school.
Yeah. So the last phrase there, so that this place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat, was written on the football locker room when I was in high school. And I looked at it because of where my locker sat every single day for 4 years, and it became ingrained in me. And then kind of as I grew up, I figured out the first half of the quote, which to me makes the second half of the quote, that line I read throughout high school, even more important.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. We can go way, way, way back in our podcast episodes, right at the beginning. And I talked a lot about the influence that growing up in Wisconsin in the late 60s, early 70s had on me, and the impact of Vince Lombardi. And that was one of his statements as well. This idea that, there are always going to be people that poke at you, that throw opinions at you. But all that matters is that, you know what, you were there, you did the work, you put in the effort, and whether you win or whether you lose, at least you were playing the game. All right.
Yep.
And that's what matters, is get in there and play the game. And if you win, great. If you
show up.
Yeah.
And these, as I go through these points a little bit more, they all kind of build on each other. There is a theme. The failure leading to growth is directly related to this quote. So that this place shall not be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Like, you showed up, you failed, okay, cool, but you move on. Or you won, cool. How do you improve to be better the next time as well?
Right. And the great line there is the cold and timid souls who don't win and they don't lose. All right. And that's a temptation we all have. All right. And that is something that has to be actively fought against, to be that cold and timid soul. You have to give it a whirl. What do you have to lose? If you don't play, you are a cold and timid soul. So get out there and get in the arena.
And if you fail in that arena, well, you bounce back, because resiliency matters. So those two things are to me, intuitively tied together and fundamentally important. Additionally, it's the opinions of others don't count. You can be a newspaper sports writer person and you can point out the flaws and insert your favorite player here. But end of the day, that favorite player, I guarantee, is at the gym at 4 a.m. doing work. I mean, you look at Kobe Bryant and his work ethic. I mean, the dude, on a talent level compared to the LeBron James and the Michael Jordans, he wasn't there, but he outworked everybody. And then he had nothing left in the tank and got up and did it again. Like that type of idea. And he didn't care what the newspapers were saying about him. He wanted to do work, and he wanted to win and compete, and he wanted to bounce back. And he did that throughout his career, through the injuries he did, and is everything that he was able to put together.
Yeah, so there's the tendency on both sides to not listening to the critics, right? One of them is you don't want to listen to them if they're just bad mouthing you. On the other hand, you don't want to listen to them if they're propping you up, because that'll encourage you to slack off, and you don't want to do that either. So you got to be really careful there, and it's important to know. You have to be honest with yourself, then, right? You know, when you failed, you got to look honestly at what do they call it? Self-scouting, right? Where did we screw up? What do we have to do? And then I think that kind of comes into your next point, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you're just like already like you're about 2 points ahead, but I think this next point is, in my opinion, the most important, because it can affect so many of these different things.
Right.
And and the point is, know yourself, know your role/job. So whatever that may be, if you're on a sports team, like maybe, you're the guy who hits every single ruck and you touch the ball twice a game, but you did your job to allow the team to be successful. If it's an academic or professional setting, it's, maybe you're really good at, I don't know, statistics, and you're the statistics guy who makes sure that the data is correct so that when you put the product out in front of people, it works the way you said it will.
Yeah, so that is a thing that's really hard to do, because there's so much focus on the superstar, right? The guy in the front, the leader, the guy at the, we talk a lot about building leadership, and we do this in companies too, but you can't have everybody be the leader. You have to have people that are doing the work. Somebody has to row the boat, and somebody has to bring the food and the water to the guys who are rowing the boat. And so all of those things are fundamentally important. I remember the story that a boss of mine told years and years ago about the idea was in the Middle Ages building a big cathedral, and there were workmen, and there were architects and scaffold guys and masons. And, one guy's job was just to haul the bricks from the quarry to the cathedral. And people would ask him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "We are building a great cathedral." And that you have to die to self in order to have the team succeed. And part of that is knowing what your purpose is on that team. And the leader helps everybody understand that.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, it's kind of the idea of kill the ego. Additionally, just because you aren't the focus, you aren't the superstar, or you aren't the guy scoring all the time, whatever it may be, doesn't mean you don't create value.
Now, you had a situation like that when you were playing rugby at Gonzaga, right? You were, for those people who don't follow rugby as much as Zach and I do, there's generally two kinds of players. There are two kinds of, the positions are.
There's two groups of players.
Yeah, so two types of players. There's like in football, what the equivalent of the linemen, they're called the
forwards or the pack.
And then they're the guys who handle the ball more often, although not exclusively. Those are guys who are called the backs. In football, you might call them the skill players, or the wide receivers, or the running backs, or something like that. But there are forwards and there are backs, and you were a back, Zach, right?
Yeah, for the most of my rugby playing career, other than a 9-month period, a 9 to 12-month period, I was exclusively a back.
And then you became, your senior year in college, if I remember right, you stopped being a back and became a flanker who was a member of the forwards.
Yeah. So my sophomore and junior year, I played outside and inside center, or center collectively, because I kind of switched back and forth. And I was there to, I was able to be in position, and I was able to score a lot, get lots of touches, and, help the team succeed in that way. And, I enjoyed doing that. And I worked well in that role, which was why I was maybe effective in it. And the team around me was really talented. So it was great to play with those players.
Yeah. So those of you who have not met Zach in real life, Zach's not a huge man. Okay. He's a pretty standard size American male, maybe even a little small. And we tend to think of rugby players as big, giant troglodytes. But Zach is certainly not one of those in any way, shape, or form. But the forwards are even more giantess troglodytes quotidian than the backs are. So you spent most of your career scooting around as a little quick guy,
avoiding contact.
Yeah. And scoring. I mean, most of the scoring comes from the backs, which is fine. That's part of the game. But you moved from that role into a role as a forward because something was needed of you that the team didn't have.
Yeah. So at the time, my senior year, we only had 2 seniors, myself and Daniel Bladel, who's one of my best friends. And then for the most part, the rest of our team was comprised of juniors and sophomores, and freshmen split about 50% the rest of the starting lineup. And when you're at a small school like Gonzaga, if you're playing rugby in the fall and it's your first season playing, you might be starting in a high-level Division I game in around Thanksgiving. Like, we're just going to throw you on in because we need the numbers. We need to, shift people around. And one of those shifts we had to make was we took me from my outside center role and we moved me to flanker because I knew the game well, and we needed somebody in the forward pack with a little bit of experience and someone that they could turn to and be like, this is our guy.
So that really had an impact in how you played the game, right? So you're no longer like in rugby, there's no blocking in rugby. You can't block like you can in football. So the only place contact takes place is at the ball, right? Unless there's one of these scrums where they all get together and they kind of push each other and try to figure, and the ball goes underneath and magic things happen. Most of the time, the ball gets out of the forwards very quickly and gets distributed to the backs in some sort of elaborate patterns and ways to get the defense out of whack. So when you went from being a back to being a forward, that changed. Well, it changed how often you touched the ball, and it changed how you approached what you needed to do when you didn't have the ball.
Yeah. So the biggest thing was I was not touching the ball. Before, if we were attacking and we were close to the goal line, there was a high likelihood as a back, I would get the ball on the outside. The likelihood of me getting the ball attacking as a forward close to the goal line became 0 because, as you mentioned earlier, I'm not the biggest guy in the field. So it was detrimental for me to carry the ball in that situation. Additionally, my role became something to allow our backline, Dara, Daniel Hodge, Joe Keane, to be in position to be successful and score more. So my job technically became run around the field like a puppy chasing the ball.
So what that meant, if you're running around chasing the ball, once a tackle takes place, you are immediately there to set up the next play, I'll call it, for the people who play rugby. And you were there to set the ruck. Is that right?
Yep. So my job became keep the forwards organized, and then the moment the ball went to the backs, get there as soon as possible so that the backs didn't have to commit someone to the ruck. So I could do that, and then they can recycle, and then they might get another opportunity to use their high-level skill to be able to score.
So this changed the way you played, but it helped the team because it allowed you to move some experience into a place where you didn't have much experience, and the team was still successful. Yeah. So who made this decision? Was the coach come to you and say, "Hey, Zach, I want you to move," or did you draw the short stick, or who made the decision?
So myself, Daniel Hodge, Matthew Hoffeditz, and I believe Michael DeKilo, after our 7th season ended, we had a kind of a leadership meeting about what we wanted to do for 15s.
Yeah, so rugby typically has 2 seasons: a season where you play 7-on-7, which is kind of like 3-on-3 basketball. It's a lot more open, a lot more running, and it's a very quick game. And then there's 15s, which is like the full version. It's and it slogs a lot more like football than the 7s version. So 7 seasons comes first, and then comes 15s, right?
Yep. Looked at our back line, and we had Daniel Hodge, Joe Keane, Dara, a bunch of very talented guys in our back line, including myself. And we realized we can move me, and I can play a supportive role while still being effective as a forward, and we don't lose any value on the field. So we made that change, and it took me a while to get used to that role because I was used to kind of having the ball in my hands, being able to attack. I did that for the majority of my rugby career, and then being able to switch allowed us to be successful. I was not the focus. I don't think anybody who would watch me play is like, why? Zach, what do? You never touch the ball. I'm just like, I'm doing all these other things so we can win.
Right. And that's the adage, right? Going back to the way you phrased it is know yourself and know your role, know your job. That's Belichick's thing, right? Is do your job, right? And he made that pretty popular. But a lot of us who have been, anybody who's been in business or been in a team sporting environment, know that is fundamentally important, that you do your role. Because if you would have decided once you moved to flanker that you were going to be like a wannabe back, that would have been disastrous, because at this point, then the people who are supposed to be running the plays from the forward perspective, now they're short one. You got an extra back running around there, and everything falls apart. So know your job, do your job, know yourself. That's your third thing. So
that leaves us to thing number 4, which is manage your energy, which is a weird way to say who you listen to matters, who you hang out with matters, what you believe about yourself matters, and the small circle of friends that you have that believe in you, regardless of how random your ideas and your endeavors may seem, matter.
So you had mentioned to me when we talked about this last week that part of this of like get the right people around you so that you don't, people talk about positive energy and negative energy, and that's kind of that's a model for understanding this. But there's even more to it than that. It's like what you choose to do. Some people are high achievers and lower achievers, whatever, but you can't do everything, right? There's not enough hours in the day. There's not enough, You
can't plan the schedule. You can't tell people what jobs to do. You can't do everything. So you have to manage what you do as a leader or even as a follower to be able to do things that create energy and create value and move forward to be able to have a successful team, a successful pursuit of whatever your endeavor may be. You can't be the guy who does everything all the time.
Well, and if you're ever a leader in a volunteer organization, and your rugby team was a volunteer organization, so you know this as well. But I've been Grand Knight of our Knights of Columbus Council, and the first time I did that about 20 years ago, the outgoing Grand Knight told me, he said, "Whatever you do, don't try to do everything, because you'll end up doing nothing. Pick 1 or 2 or 3 things that you are going to focus on for the year, whether it's, making sure the youth sports groups go well, or making sure that the parish stays, clean and safe, or whatever it is you're doing. Focus on those things. Focus on 1 or 2 things, and make sure you do those things at a high level and get the people behind you. You cannot do everything, and that's an important role. And once you give that up, the idea of doing everything, you can have some other people step in and do some of those other things that need to get done.
Yeah. And if you're focusing on 1 or 2 things, 3 things maybe, and you're doing that at a high level, you're going to have people fall in behind you and pick up thing 4 through 7. And eventually your organization's doing 20 things all at a high level.
Right. That's a great, because if you start trying to do everything, people are going to be like, well, Zach's got that. And you're going to end up missing.
That kind of goes back to knowing yourself, knowing your role is do your job well and effectively, and everything's going to fall into place. But that leads us to thing number 5, which I have phrased, and you kind of have phrased this differently. I call it strength and vulnerability.
Yeah, when we talked about this, I was like, know what you do well and know what you don't do well. All right. And then keep doing well the things you do well, and work on those places where you are weak. And I saw this when I was teaching calculus. I would see kids that they work really hard on the problems that they know how to do, and the problems that they don't know how to do, they don't work on, because that's not any fun. Right? All the growth comes from the places where you can, nobody's great at everything. There are going to be places where you can work, and a little bit of work there is going to pay off a lot more than a lot of work in a place where you're already good. So find those holes and fill them in. And that's a way to acknowledge it. It's a hard thing to do. I'm not good at this. I'm going to work on it. So,
yeah. I think for me, it's evaluating yourself and being able to have that tough conversation with your coworkers, your teammates, whoever it may be, is being like, hey, I don't do this well. I'm taking myself off this job. Going back to when I was playing flanker, one of the things we were discussing is who's going to throw the lineouts. And I was one of those people taking those reps because I've done it before in sevens and things like that. but it wasn't working. So I looked at myself and like, all right, cool. I can still organize our forwards from a different position in the line out. So my reps that I'm taking, we need to give to someone else so we can be effective in this phase of the game.
Yeah. So that takes a certain amount of humility to say, you know what,
yeah.
So there's two choices, right? I mean, and they're both, there's three choices. One, just ignore it and keep doing it. Two is say, you know what, I'm not getting this job done, and I know Timmy can do it better, so let's put Timmy in this role. That's the humility thing. And the third one is, you know what, let's put Timmy in here for now, and I'm going to work with, here's my plan for improving this component of my game. Yeah. And those last two, both of those improve the team. All right. The second one, the last one improves it more because now you have you and Timmy can both do that job. All right. The worst one is the first one where you don't acknowledge where you're weak. And for those of you who listen to this podcast on a regular basis, Zach and I talk every week after the show. What did we do well? What did we do poorly? What do we have to work on? And if you go listen to our, maybe not, maybe don't listen to our first couple shows because
there is the mystery episode. So
rumor has it that there's an episode 0, but that'll come back at a different time. But we have to improve. You have to constantly improve, and that's one of those things: is recognize your strength, recognize your weakness, and address the needs that you have. So
be vulnerable and having that tough. It's a tough conversation to be like, "Hey, I suck at this," or whatever it may be, and having your teammates or coworkers point out what you need to do better. So address your flaws and find a way to go forward and improve on that. You mentioned it with the calculus problems. I think there's so many things in life that maybe take a step back and see it. That ties into another point that I'll get to later. But point number 6 is one of my favorite phrases of talent is overrated. This kind of comes and stems from the idea that if you show up and you keep showing up and you put in work and you fill your role or you do your job, people who care will notice. And it doesn't matter how much talent you have. I mean, talent is good, but if you're putting in that hard work and you're showing up, you're going to be able to carry yourself further than you would just on talent alone.
Yeah, and there's the story of the 1980 U.S. Olympic hockey team addresses that head on early on in the film. The players these are really, really good hockey players that Herb Brooks put together for the team. But they were not a team. They did not play as a team. And there's a famous quote that comes out of there that says, you don't have enough talent to win on talent alone. And that was a lesson that those guys needed to learn. And a lot of people in business teams, academic teams, sports teams, they just push themselves ahead. And it's great to have a great, maybe on a doubles tennis team, you can get by on talent alone. Maybe on, you can do it if you're doing individual sports. Team sports, it's going to get you in trouble. And any team activity like business is going to get that for you.
Yeah. So it's understanding what your talent is and how to work on that and get it better, which is back to that strength and vulnerability thing.
Yeah.
I think for me,
I was going to say, don't get me wrong. Talent's really important. All right.
Oh yeah.
But it's overrated. It's not the only thing out there. And there are a lot of examples out there of teams without the best individuals succeeding, and it's one of those the total being greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, the intangibles, the other things going on, they make a difference as well. That hard work, that showing up matters. And additionally, the last thing, which sounds extremely simple, but it carries a huge weight in these type of manifestations of team and environments, and it is, above all, be kind.
Yeah.
So your attitude towards others makes a major difference. You don't know what anyone is going through, so support them and show up. It might not look like much, but it matters a lot more than what it looks like it ends up actually being.
Yeah, I think about it. I'm really glad you brought this one up because I see so many opportunities for people to function in a gracious manner, right? And I see the opportunities there, and I see people just squander those opportunities to be good, to do good, and to be kind. And I keep thinking of like your mom and I, Zach, last fall, late last summer, we were eating at a local hamburger stand down there in Nolensville, yep. And there was a flag football game going on at 7:30 at night. It was like a city league kind of, it's a bunch of yahoos. It's kids 18 to 50, and they're out there playing flag football on a Friday night in Nolensville, Tennessee. And, the field is marked with cones and there's a guy wearing a ref shirt. And one of these guys went off on the ref for like missing a pass interference call or something really stupid. And eventually got himself kicked out of the game and spent the next 10 minutes slowly walking to his car and berating the referee. And I was like, what the heck, dude? What is going on with your attitudes? This is flag football, Nolensville City League on a Friday night at 6:30 in July. How can this matter to anything? And like, look at how many people fail number 7 in a situation that it doesn't matter. The only thing that really matters is treating your fellow humans like human beings.
Yeah. And I think I have a perfect story. My friend Nikki, my second semester of law school as a whole, the first year was difficult for me for various different reasons that I'm not going to explain on this episode. But we were all working on our final end of the semester summary judgment brief, and none of us had any idea what we were doing. So we're all running around like chickens with our heads cut off, like, hey, does this work? We have no idea. Everyone's just agreeing with each other because that sounds like you know what you're doing. But I was texting Nikki. I have no idea what it was about. Probably about the summary judgment thing. And then after our conversation, I remember like a few minutes later, she texted me, and I ingrained in my brain is the message that says, "Are you okay, comma, you don't seem like yourself lately."
Yeah.
Like just somebody reaching out. Like, I mean, Nikki is one of my best friends. Like, she took the time to be kind and reach out to someone while we all had these way more important things going on in life, and just want to be kind and be there present as a friend. Like, that goes a long way. Yeah.
And if you want to build a team, there's that sensitivity and vulnerability. And those sound kind of like, kind of campy, fruity little things. And we all need to be tough guys. And you know what? Hey, I'm all for tough. Like, we started this episode about, about what blood and mud and dirt and sticks and stuff. But it comes through caring. And I think we're seeing a lot of that stuff with all these lockdowns. It's really hard to be that person now because we have such little personal contact. But it doesn't mean you can't take the time to care. Take the time.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Zach.
This one last thing, like being like, it's, we mentioned this a little bit in our Thanksgiving episode about the appreciation. Like it makes like, it takes 2 minutes at most. No, it takes 2 seconds to be like, hey, thanks for showing up. Thanks for being there. Thanks for supporting me. I have lots of friends who have no idea why I am pursuing a data science certification to pursue my legal career, because to them, there is no intersection between the two. To me, there's so much intersection between the two. They have no idea what I'm doing, but they support me and they see the passion in that. That kindness, that appreciation goes a long way. It's the continual forwardness of the kindness makes a big difference.
Yeah. So now you're looking to put all this to get like, so do you like go talk to high school kids about this sort of thing? What's the, you're going to like start grabbing a bullhorn and shouting at the public on the street corner, or what's the plan here?
So what am I going to do with all this information besides writing it down in my journal?
You're not going to go stand on a park bench and shout through a bullhorn at passing crowds. Well, are you?
No. So I mentioned earlier that I began writing these ideas down more in quarantine, when quarantine started, and that kind of influenced and pushed me to the idea of I want to write a book.
All right. So this is kind of focused on anybody who works in a team environment, right? Which is like
or anybody in general. The end of there's a final theme 8, which ties all of the 7 other themes together, which is bet on yourself. And then you tie all these 7 things together and you put the skills in place to change your mindset and manifest what you want to do in life.
Yeah. So it's about believing in what you want to do, and then make and bet on yourself. There's a risk there that someone might hear that and say, well, are you saying that all you need is yourself? Is that the only thing? Or are you saying something like, if you're going to go, you got to go into the arena and really all you have is what you can control, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you can ask for help and assistance, and whether that's on the ground or divinely, you can, all of those things are part of the equation. But in the end, you control you, right?
Yeah. You're the one in charge of your life. So take the initiative and understand maybe the stumbles you've had and how that's have affected you as a person, and what you can do going forward. Who you're surrounding yourself with, and how that creates energy or doesn't create energy for you to want to be successful. And understanding that if you fail, you're strong enough to get back up and go for round 2.
I hear you. That's a great plan. So it's a noble endeavor to leave that written down for other folks. And let's keep me posted on that. And let me know how I can help. So that's exactly, we're about out of time. We
are about out of time. We have a few housekeeping things I think we need to let the public know about.
Yeah. So if
you want to start us off with those.
Yeah. So the first one is this one from episode 9, I believe it was. We talked about nutrition, and at one point in that episode, Zach mentioned that he takes occasionally will take an 18-minute nap, and I asked if anybody knew the origin. The origin. Why is it 18 minutes? And we had a couple guesses that came in through the interwebs, and none of them were actually correct. So Zach, can you tell me, why is it when you take a nap, it's 18 minutes?
So the intermission time in a standard NHL hockey game is 18 minutes. So I use that time to nap as opposed to listen to the guys in the studio talk about stuff.
All right.
And it's really good for when you're watching playoff hockey that you take an 18-minute nap and then you're ready to go because you got playoff hockey to watch.
Yeah. So playoff hockey. Yeah. So, and if the game goes like overtime or double overtime, you're talking
or quadruple overtime.
Yeah. You're talking 2, 3, 4 extra little intermittent naps there, where otherwise you'd be spending 18 minutes listening to Yahoo's chat about upping the pressure on
the same thing you've been watching.
Yeah. And so you don't need them to tell you what's going on. You can see it yourself. And then the other thing is, you get that little re-energizing instead of, scrolling through the Insta-Twit face and seeing what's going on there. So that is a great thing. So we encourage the 18-minute nap because of its lineup with hockey. So we're going to do other housekeeping things later, Zach, unless there's one I'm thinking of that you're not, or you're thinking that you're not.
If you're in charge of all the housekeeping.
Yeah, that's right. The house is a mess.
I'm just the good looks on this.
You're the eye candy, and I sweep the road. So first of all, I want to thank Zach for today's episode. That's quite a lot of work he's been putting into this, and he's got some writing to do, I know, and we're working on those things. Again, I want to thank the listeners for spending your time with us. And remember, find us on Spotify and on Twitter and on the InstaWeb. And that's where we are.
Yeah, I just also want to thank a couple of friends who have influenced some of those ideas that you heard. My friend Sarah, my friend Nikki, who I already mentioned, my friend Brittany. The three of them have been monumental in me refining and talking through these ideas and kind of getting them to what they currently are on paper and then going forward. So big shout out to those three. So yeah,
I hear you. It's always helpful to have people pushing you along.
Yeah. All right. And on that note, I think we're out of time. So we'll see you guys next time. Have a great week and take care.